When the sun sets over the golden domes of Moscow, something extraordinary happens. The city transforms. What was once the heart of an empire, a place of rigid control and whispered secrets, becomes something entirely different under the cover of darkness. This is a story about transformation, about a society caught between tradition and modernity, about people searching for connection in one of the world's most misunderstood cities. Moscow's nightlife isn't what you think it is. Forget the stereotypes, the Cold War imagery, the assumptions you've carried for years. What happens here after midnight is a reflection of something deeper, something that speaks to the human condition itself. This is about real people, real stories, and a cultural revolution that's been unfolding for 3 decades, largely hidden from Western eyes. Let me take you inside, not as a tourist, not as an outsider looking for cheap thrills, but as someone trying to understand what drives millions of people to seek connection, escape, and meaning in the darkness of a Moscow night. The temperature outside might be -20, but inside these venues, something is burning. It's energy, it's defiance, it's life itself refusing to be contained. The story begins where most Moscow nights begin, in the center of the city where old Soviet architecture stands shoulder to shoulder with gleaming modern towers. The contrast is jarring, deliberate, symbolic. Here, in clubs housed in former factories and palaces, in basements that once stored state secrets, a new generation is writing its own rules. They're the children and grandchildren of the Soviet era, but they're creating something their ancestors never could have imagined. Walk into any major Moscow club on a Friday night, and you'll feel it immediately. The music hits you first, a wall of sound that's somehow both familiar and foreign. Russian DJs have developed their own style, blending Western electronic music with elements of their own musical heritage. You'll hear traces of traditional Russian folk melodies woven into techno beats. Classical compositions reimagined as house music. It's cultural fusion at its most visceral level. The crowd is different too. In cities like London or New York, nightclub culture often segregates by age, by social class, by musical preference. Here you'll find 20-year-old students dancing next to 40-year-old business people, artists mingling with engineers, old money mixing with new. There's a democracy to the darkness, a temporary suspension of the rigid social hierarchies that govern daily life. For a few hours, none of that matters. What matters is the moment, the music, the shared experience of being alive and free. But let's talk about what everyone wants to know about: the people themselves. Russian women have a reputation that precedes them, and like all reputations, it's built on fragments of truth wrapped in layers of misconception. Yes, there's an emphasis on appearance here that might seem extreme to Western sensibilities. Women often dress with a level of elegance and intention that's become rare in more casual Western nightlife scenes. High heels in the snow, immaculate makeup, carefully chosen outfits. It's not about vanity alone. It's about pride, about making a statement, about refusing to let harsh circumstances diminish one's sense of self. The men too participate in this culture of presentation. Well-tailored suits, attention to grooming, a certain formality that persists even in casual settings. This isn't superficiality, it's cultural. In a society that experienced such profound hardship for so many generations, maintaining dignity through appearance became a form of resistance, a way of asserting humanity when everything else was stripped away. That legacy continues. Understanding Moscow's nightlife requires understanding its recent history. 35 years ago, this scene didn't exist. Nightclubs as we understand them were forbidden, private gatherings were monitored. Dancing to Western music was an act of subtle rebellion. When the Soviet Union collapsed, it wasn't just a political system that fell. An entire way of life, an entire structure of control and predictability, vanished almost overnight. The freedom that followed was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. The 1990s were wild, chaotic, dangerous. Moscow's nightlife in that era was the Wild West. New money, no rules, incredible risk. Organized crime controlled many venues. Violence was common. But from that chaos emerged something remarkable. A generation that had tasted freedom and refused to give it back. They built the foundations of what exists today, learning from mistakes, creating safer spaces, developing a culture that could sustain itself. Today's Moscow nightlife is sophisticated in ways that might surprise you. Yes, there are still rough edges, places you shouldn't go, risks you need to understand, but there are also world-class venues that rival anything you'll find in Berlin, Tokyo, or Miami. Clubs like Gypsy, Icon, Mutabor. These aren't just dance floors, they're cultural institutions hosting international DJs, avant-garde performances, art installations. They're spaces where Russia's creative class gathers to push boundaries and imagine new possibilities. The music scene deserves special attention. Moscow has developed one of the world's most vibrant electronic music communities. Russian producers are gaining international recognition, bringing their unique perspective to genres that were born in the West. There's a darkness to Russian electronic music, a melancholy that reflects the national character. Even the most energetic tracks carry an undercurrent of something deeper, something that speaks to struggle and endurance. Live music venues tell another part of the story. Jazz clubs tucked into basements, indie rock venues in converted warehouses, traditional restaurants where Roma musicians play until dawn. The diversity is staggering. You can experience 5 completely different musical worlds in a single night, each one revealing another facet of Russian culture. Let's address the elephant in the room: sex and romance in Moscow's nightlife. This is where things get complicated, where cultural differences become most apparent, where misconceptions run deepest. Yes, Moscow has a dating culture. Yes, people meet in clubs and bars. Yes, casual encounters happen, just as they do in every major city on Earth. But the dynamics are different, shaped by specific cultural and economic factors that outsiders often misunderstand. Russian society has what we might call a marriage paradox. There's enormous social pressure to marry and marry young, yet Russia also has one of the world's highest divorce rates, hovering around 55%. This creates a complex dynamic. Many people marry in their early 20s, often before they've fully discovered who they are. When those marriages fail, often within 5 to 7 years, they re-enter the dating world older, wiser, more cautious, but also more desperate to find genuine connection. This explains something visitors often notice. There's an intensity to romantic interactions here that can feel overwhelming. People aren't just looking for fun or distraction, they're searching for meaning, for partnership, for someone to share the weight of existence in a society that can be brutally demanding. The small talk phase that characterizes Western dating often gets compressed or skipped entirely. Conversations go deep quickly. Emotional walls come down fast. This isn't recklessness. It's efficiency, born from experience and limited time. The economic dimension cannot be ignored. Russia has significant wealth inequality, and it manifests clearly in nightlife spaces. Some venues cater exclusively to the ultra-wealthy, with bottle service that costs more than many people earn in a month, with dress codes that effectively function as class barriers. Other venues are accessible to average working people, but even there, the costs can be significant relative to local salaries. This creates a stratified nightlife ecosystem where your economic status largely determines which world you have access to. This economic pressure contributes to phenomena that make many outsiders uncomfortable. Transactional relationships exist, ranging from explicit prostitution to murkier arrangements that blur the lines between dating and economic exchange. Sugar dating, where younger women date older, wealthier men with clear, if unspoken, financial expectations, is common enough to be unremarkable. Judging this from a Western perspective misses important context. In a society where women often earn significantly less than men for comparable work, where single mothers face enormous economic challenges, where retirement security is uncertain, these arrangements can represent rational economic decisions rather than moral failings. That said, the prostitution industry in Moscow is real and significant. Escort services advertise openly online. Some nightclubs have reputations as hunting grounds for sex workers seeking clients. High-end hotels have staff trained to look the other way. This exists in parallel with legitimate nightlife, sometimes overlapping, sometimes separate. The women involved come from various backgrounds. Some are local Muscovites. Many come from smaller Russian cities or former Soviet republics, seeking economic opportunities that don't exist in their hometowns. Their stories are complex, often tragic, rarely simple. The health implications deserve honest discussion. Russia has struggled with HIV rates higher than most European countries, though lower than many people assume. Contraception use varies widely. Abortion rates, while declining, remain among the world's highest, partly due to the legacy of Soviet-era policies that made abortion the primary method of birth control. Sexually transmitted infections are a real concern, particularly among younger people who may lack comprehensive sex education. These are facts, not judgments. They're part of the reality that anyone engaging with Moscow's nightlife needs to understand. Safety is another complex topic. Moscow is simultaneously safer and more dangerous than most Western cities, depending on how you measure. Violent street crime is relatively rare in central areas. You're unlikely to be mugged or assaulted randomly. However, targeted crime against foreigners exists. Scams are common. Drink spiking happens. Corrupt police sometimes target foreigners for bribes. Certain areas of the city are controlled by organized crime groups who don't take kindly to outsiders causing problems. The rules are different here, and ignorance is not protection. For women visiting Moscow's nightlife, the dynamics can be particularly challenging. Russian men can be aggressive in their approaches by Western standards. What might be considered harassment in London or Los Angeles is often seen as normal courtship here. Learning to firmly but politely decline unwanted attention is essential. At the same time, many Russian men are genuinely hospitable, protective, generous. The challenge is distinguishing between sincere interest and predatory behavior, a challenge made harder by alcohol, language barriers, and cultural differences. Language itself is a massive factor. English is spoken in upscale venues and tourist-heavy areas, but venture beyond those spaces, and you'll find yourself in a world where Russian dominates completely. This linguistic isolation is both a barrier and a gateway. It keeps casual tourists at arm's length, but rewards those who make even minimal effort to learn basic Russian phrases. The warmth that emerges when a foreigner attempts Russian, however poorly, is remarkable. It signals respect, breaks down walls, transforms interactions. Let's talk about alcohol, because you cannot understand Russian nightlife without understanding Russian drinking culture. Vodka is not a cliché. It's a fundamental element of social bonding, celebration, commiseration, and daily life. The quantities consumed would alarm most Western observers. Toasting is ritual, refusal is insult, moderation is sometimes viewed with suspicion. This creates nightlife experiences that can be magnificent and dangerous in equal measure. Friendships form quickly over shared bottles. Inhibitions vanish, secrets spill out. But so do fights, accidents. Bad decisions with lasting consequences. The club scene has its own internal geography. Smaller venues like Powerhouse specialize in underground electronic music, attracting serious music fans who come to dance, not pose. Larger clubs like Icon are more about spectacle, about seeing and being seen, about the full nightclub experience with all its theater and excess. Then there are the alternative spaces, art galleries hosting late-night parties, warehouse raves that move locations to avoid authorities, private loft parties accessible only through insider networks. Each ecosystem has its own rules, its own crowd, its own vibe. Comparing Moscow's nightlife to other major cities reveals interesting patterns. Berlin's legendary club scene is more permissive, more experimental, more sexually liberated. Moscow's scene has boundaries, spoken and unspoken, that Berlin abandoned decades ago. Tokyo's nightlife is more polite, more organized, more compartmentalized. Moscow is rawer, more chaotic, more emotionally intense. New York's scene is more diverse, more inclusive, more accepting of difference. Moscow's scene is more homogeneous, less overtly welcoming to outsiders, but potentially more intimate once you break through initial barriers. The LGBTQ+ experience in Moscow's nightlife deserves specific mention. Russia's political climate has become increasingly hostile to sexual minorities. The so-called gay propaganda law, expanded in recent years, has driven much of LGBTQ+ life underground. Yet queer nightlife persists. Private parties, secret venues, coded language. The courage required to participate in Moscow's LGBTQ+ scene is extraordinary. Every gathering carries risk. Police raids happen. Violence from anti-gay groups is a real threat. Yet people continue to gather, to celebrate, to build community in the face of state-sanctioned discrimination. Their resilience is humbling. Food culture intersects with nightlife in distinctly Russian ways. Late-night dining is not just about satisfying hunger. It's about continuation, about extending the night, about transition from party to dawn. 24-hour restaurants serve traditional Russian cuisine alongside international options. Sharing food becomes another bonding ritual, another way to forge or deepen connections. The conversations that happen over 3 a.m. borscht and pelmeni are where real understanding occurs, where the performance of nightlife gives way to genuine human connection. Public transportation adds another layer to the experience. The Moscow metro is famous for its beauty, its efficiency, its affordability, but it closes around 1 a.m., creating a pressure point in every night out. Do you leave early enough to catch the last train? Or do you commit fully to staying out until the metro reopens around 5:30 a.m.? This decision shapes the entire evening. Those who stay often find the hours between 3 and 6 to be the most magical. The crowd's thin, the pretense drops. What remains are the true believers, the ones who came for connection rather than performance. taxis and ride-sharing services have transformed late-night Moscow. The notorious dangers of unofficial cabs have largely been replaced by apps like Yandex Taxi, making it safer to move around the city at all hours. This has democratized nightlife access, allowing people to venture beyond their neighborhoods, to explore different scenes, to take risks they might have avoided when transportation was more precarious. Technology has been liberating, though it's also made the city more trackable, more monitored, less anonymous. The political dimension of Moscow nightlife is impossible to ignore. These spaces exist in a country with an authoritarian government, where freedom of assembly is restricted, where opposition to state policies can bring serious consequences. Yet nightlife venues function as unofficial free spaces, temporary autonomous zones where normal rules are suspended. Conversations happen in clubs that couldn't happen in public squares. Ideas circulate. Dissent finds expression, usually subtle, sometimes overt. Music becomes protest. Fashion becomes statement. The act of gathering itself becomes a form of resistance. This political undercurrent adds tension to every evening out. Security cameras are everywhere. Some venues are rumored to have connections to intelligence services. Loose talk can have consequences. Yet people take these risks because the alternative, retreating into private life, abandoning public space entirely, feels like defeat. Nightlife becomes an assertion of normalcy, a refusal to be completely controlled, a claim to life beyond politics. Seasonal variations dramatically affect Moscow's nightlife character. Winter nights, when darkness comes at 3 p.m. and temperatures plunge to -30, create an intimacy born from shared survival. People huddle together in overheated venues, grateful for warmth, for light, for human contact. Summer brings the opposite energy. White nights when the sun barely sets, rooftop parties, outdoor venues along the Moscow River. The city exhales, people pour into streets and parks. Nightlife extends into dawn without ever feeling like night at all. The economic dynamics of running nightlife venues in Moscow are brutal. Rent in desirable locations is astronomical. Licensing requirements are complex and often arbitrary. Unofficial payments to various authorities are often necessary. Competition is fierce, yet venues keep opening because the demand is insatiable. This is a city of 12 million people with limited entertainment options compared to Western cities. Nightlife fills a crucial role, providing escape from difficult daily realities, offering space for self-expression, creating the possibility of joy and connection. Staff in these venues have their own stories, bartenders who speak 4 languages, working multiple jobs to survive, security personnel with backgrounds in military or law enforcement, navigating complex social dynamics while preventing violence. Coat check attendants who see everything, hear everything, remember everyone. DJ booths and dance floors are where ambitious young artists try to build careers in an industry with few pathways to success. Each person is trying to make it work, to build a life in a city that's both opportunity and obstacle. Tourism has complicated Moscow's nightlife in recent years. Before political tensions rose, the city was becoming an increasingly popular destination for international visitors curious about post-Soviet Russia. Nightlife was a major draw. This brought foreign money, new influences, cross-cultural exchanges. It also brought problems: sex tourism, exploitation, venues that catered primarily to foreigners and lost their local character. Recent years have seen foreign visitor numbers decline dramatically, returning nightlife to primarily local crowds. This has been economically painful for venues, but has also restored some authenticity. Let's address the fantasy versus reality gap. Western media has created certain narratives about Russian nightlife, often focused on excess, danger, and sexual availability. These narratives contain fragments of truth but miss the full picture. Yes, you can find excess and danger if you seek them. Yes, transactional relationships exist. But you can also find genuine warmth, intellectual stimulation, artistic innovation, and human kindness. The reality is that Moscow's nightlife, like nightlife everywhere, is what you make of it and what you bring to it. The hospitality you'll encounter can be overwhelming. Russians have a cultural tradition of generosity toward guests that persists even in commercial nightlife settings. Share a table with strangers, and you will likely be offered drinks. Strike up a conversation, and you might receive a 2-hour lecture on Russian history or philosophy. Show genuine interest in someone's life, and you'll hear stories of extraordinary depth and emotion. This openness comes from a culture that values deep human connection over superficial politeness, quality over quantity in relationships. Yet this same culture can be closed and suspicious. Trust must be earned. Outsiders remain outsiders until proven otherwise. The smile that comes easily in American service culture is absent here. Waitstaff aren't trying to maximize tips through artificial friendliness. They're doing a job, and they'll do it competently. But warmth must be genuine, or nothing at all. This can feel cold initially, but it means that when warmth does come, when someone truly welcomes you, it's real. There's no performance, no hidden agenda, just human recognizing human. The question of loneliness hangs over Moscow's nightlife like a shadow. This is a city where many people live alone, where traditional family structures have broken down, where economic pressures make long-term planning difficult. People come to nightlife venues not just for entertainment, but for connection, for the possibility of finding someone who understands, someone who can share the burden of existence. This desperation, usually hidden beneath confidence and style, occasionally surfaces in the small hours when alcohol has stripped away pretense. Romance in Moscow is complicated by practical considerations. Housing is expensive and often involves living with family well into adulthood. Privacy is a luxury. This means that new relationships often have nowhere to go, literally. Cheap hotels rent rooms by the hour, understanding their real clientele. Some clubs have back rooms for exactly this purpose. These pragmatic accommodations to difficult circumstances can seem sordid to outsiders, but they're simply solutions to real problems faced by real people trying to build intimate lives in a city that doesn't make it easy. The impact of social media on Moscow's nightlife has been profound. Instagram culture is enormous here. Venues succeed or fail based on their photogenic qualities. People dress not just to impress those physically present, but to impress followers who'll see the photos tomorrow. This has created a feedback loop of escalating presentation standards. It's also created opportunities for new forms of social connection and new businesses built around nightlife documentation and promotion. The Moscow nightlife influencer is a real profession now, with real economic impact. Technology has also enabled new forms of gathering. Telegram channels announce secret parties, dating apps have transformed how people meet. Digital payment systems have largely replaced cash in upscale venues. This modernization has made nightlife more accessible in some ways, more exclusive in others. If you're not connected to the right channels, literally and figuratively, entire worlds remain hidden. The generational divide in Moscow's nightlife is fascinating. Older generations, those who remember Soviet times, often view nightlife with suspicion as Western decadence, as moral decay. Younger generations see it as normal, as their birthright, as freedom their parents and grandparents never had. This creates family tensions, societal tensions, political tensions. Nightlife becomes a symbol of larger conflicts about Russia's identity and direction. Music festivals represent another dimension of Moscow nightlife culture. Massive electronic music festivals like Alpha Future People draw hundreds of thousands. Smaller genre-specific festivals create communities around shared musical passions. These events are where Moscow's nightlife spills beyond club walls, becoming public celebration, becoming visible assertion of a cultural movement that's often hidden in the city's darker corners. The environmental contrast between outdoor Russia and indoor nightlife spaces is extreme. Outside might be frozen wasteland or summer swelter. Inside is carefully controlled climate, carefully crafted atmosphere, carefully curated experience. This sharp boundary between outside and inside mirrors larger themes in Russian culture. The harsh external world requiring survival skills. The warm, intimate space of gathered humans offering respite and meaning. Nightlife venues are modern versions of ancient gathering places where people came together to survive winter's darkness through shared stories. Music and vodka. Let's talk about morning after. Dawn in Moscow after a night out is a specific kind of experience. The metro rumbles to life. Early commuters shuffle past nightlife refugees stumbling toward home. The cognitive dissonance is total. The magic of night evaporates in harsh morning light. What seemed profound at 4 a.m. feels embarrassing by 7. Promises made will likely be broken. Phone numbers exchanged may never be called. Yet something happened. Connection occurred, however briefly. For a few hours, loneliness was held at bay. The cost of this lifestyle adds up. Financial cost is obvious. Moscow nightlife is expensive by local standards. But there are other costs. Sleep deprivation in a culture that demands productivity. Relationship strain when nightlife becomes escape from daily responsibilities. Health consequences from alcohol, from stress, from irregular schedules. Emotional exhaustion from the constant performance that nightlife demands. These costs are rarely discussed but are very real for those who make nightlife a regular part of their lives. Yet people continue to come night after night, weekend after weekend, year after year. Why? Because humans need more than survival. We need beauty, excitement, possibility, connection. We need spaces where transformation feels possible, where we can try on different versions of ourselves, where tomorrow might bring something different than yesterday. Moscow's nightlife provides this imperfectly, sometimes dangerously, but genuinely. If you visit Moscow's nightlife, approach with respect, with curiosity, with awareness that you're entering someone else's world. Learn basic Russian phrases. Understand cultural norms around personal space. Eye contact, directness. Drink less than you think you can handle. Trust your instincts about unsafe situations. Don't treat people as exotic specimens or available commodities. Remember that everyone you encounter is a complete human being with their own story, their own struggles, their own dreams. You're a guest here, act like one. The future of Moscow's nightlife is uncertain. Political tensions, economic pressures, social changes all create instability. Venues close suddenly. Regulations shift without warning. What's popular today might be gone tomorrow. Yet, nightlife adapts, survives, persists. Because the human need for gathering, for music, for dance, for connection doesn't disappear just because times are hard. If anything, difficult times make these spaces more necessary, more precious, more vital. Moscow's nightlife is ultimately a mirror. It reflects Russian society's contradictions. Tradition versus modernity, control versus freedom, collective versus individual, appearance versus reality. It reflects universal human needs for connection, for meaning, for escape, for joy. It reflects the specific challenges of this historical moment, of living in a country caught between past and future, of building private happiness while navigating public pressures. So if you want to understand Moscow, spend time in its nightlife, not as a tourist checking boxes, but as someone genuinely trying to understand. Listen to the music, watch the people, notice what makes them laugh, what makes them sad, what brings them together. Accept the drink that's offered, dance badly. Struggle with the language, allow yourself to be confused, overwhelmed, maybe even transformed, because that's what great nightlife does. It breaks down walls, creates unexpected connections, reminds us that beneath all our differences, we're remarkably similar in what we seek and what we fear. The lights will come up eventually. The music will stop, the crowds will disperse. Moscow will return to being just a city, buildings and streets, and ordinary life. But something will remain, a memory, a connection, an understanding. That's the gift of nightlife, Moscow's or anywhere else. It's temporary sanctuary, fleeting communion, brief glimpse of what's possible when humans gather in darkness and create light together. This is Moscow after midnight. This is humanity searching for connection. This is the universal story told with a Russian accent, Russian vodka, Russian music, Russian hearts. It's messy and beautiful and dangerous and sacred all at once. Just like life itself. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. If you've experienced Moscow's nightlife, tell us your story. If you haven't but want to understand our world better, subscribe for more explorations of culture, humanity, and the spaces where we come together. Because these stories matter. These connections matter. We matter, all of us. Searching for meaning in the darkness. Creating light together however we can.